Shoot.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I think we're going to wait for a few more people to join in. So just give us a few minutes and you guys can read our little disclaimer that's up. Okay. Should we, maybe 2 more minutes? What do you think, Heather?
You can start. It takes a few minutes to get everyone in and.
Okay. Well, we would all like to thank all of you who are here for joining us, and to thank our panelists today. And of course, Heather from Heather Elder Reps and Stacy Fischer of Exposure New York, my AMA board member colleagues. So if I can introduce our panelists today, we have Teri Heyman, who's a producer for a tech company in the Bay Area. We have Godfrey is a senior art producer for Mary Kay Global from Pink House Agency. Cliff Lewis, director of art productions at Droga 5, and Heather Harvey, executive producer of Wieden and Kennedy. And then I am Vanessa Stevens, for those who don't know me. So I think we're maybe give it a minute, but today we're going to talk about usage rights and copyright, which has always been for me a really pretty big topic. And it's really one of the reasons that I got excited about being part of the AMA. It's, as everybody here I think will agree, it has changed so much over the years. Like every aspect of usage, really, the way we talk about it, the way we charge for it, the way images are being used, everything. It's a landscape that's pretty constantly shifting. You know, when I started, as maybe some of you as well, there was no digital usage. It was pretty conventional. There was advertising and it was really distinct from editorial. And when they did overlap, it was like acknowledged as an editorial that had a name. The catalogs were how we shop from home, and everything was really print oriented in one form or another. And I think it was in about like the early 2000s when things started to really shift and change. And I remember first talking about you know, internet use, and basically it was an afterthought and we kind of gave it away for free. Like it wasn't something that we thought warranted a big fee in the beginning. And then I think that, you know, that changed for me anyway when websites started to be really image driven and technology caught up with what design could take. And then, you know, magazines became brands and the sort of that line blurred a little bit. And then you could shop online, and then it evolved even further when brands joined the social media platforms, and then they needed their own editorial content, and then digital advertising took off. And so now we have this massively wide open field of usage options. Usage terms have changed and there's so many. There's more images to consider than ever, and we all have to manage and keep track of them. So we felt like this was a really good topic for all of us to get together and to talk about and see how we all navigate this. And, you know, we hope will be one of many conversations about usage. Because there are a lot of facets. You know, one thing we probably won't have time to get into is like the NFT world, but that's a really big conversation in usage. So maybe Heather Eldridge, do you want to start asking some questions?
Totally, that was super helpful and a great way to kind of start us out. And I think, you know, testament to what a big conversation it is. We've had all these offline conversations about usage just by announcing the fact that we were going to do it. All these reps started emailing us, asking us questions, things that they wanted us to talk about it. So we know it's such a hot button issue and something that really needs to be explored deeply. So we're so thankful to have all of you guys here to help us do that. And I think a great first way to start is maybe with a question for Cliff. Sorry to make you first, Cliff. But it would be really interesting to know, at what point does usage come up in the creative conversation for you guys?
I think for us, usage comes up right at the very beginning. When we're scoping out a project, when we're just really beginning to talk about the brief, the project, the sort of, you know, the comms plan. That's a question that we ask right out the gate. because it's important in terms of budget, how we allocate the budget, how we actually plan the production. So it's a really important part of the it's an important part of like the initial discussion with the client. So it's a question, you know, we've gotten used to asking very early on. What we don't want to do is go, you know, down the path and then get to a discussion about usage and then it becomes an issue. So we'd rather have all the, you know, all the components of the production on the table at the very beginning, because it gives us a better understanding of sort of how to plan the production, how to manage the budget. Are there any issues that we need to address now? Because that's really important about how we actually move forward from that initial step. So information is like really critical at the very beginning, I think.
Teri, I see you nodding your head. Is it the same for you at a, you know, tech company? Do you always have the same usage maybe?
No, so I'm work for a business to business group at the company. So we're B2C. So so we're basically, the budgets aren't as big as consumers' budgets. So one of the first things is also not overbuying rights. If I don't need global because it's only going to run in a certain place, or if I don't, because that's the big thing. Like a lot of times they just want to buy 5 years or they want to own it outright. And I don't have the money for that half the time. So I'm like, let's really look at what the media plan is. If we have a media plan, half the time we don't, but it's, you know, at least I just don't want to overbuy too, because we know we can come back and renegotiate if we need to later on another year's budget versus overspending on stuff that it's just going to sit there and not run. So that was just something we kind of look at as well as a way to save money.
And is that the same for you, Allie?
Yeah, pretty much. Kind of like Teri, my side is global. So I may work on projects that are global projects. They're going to be picked up by our EU, North America, South America, and Latin America regions, or AP in China. Or I'm strictly working on Latin America projects. So we generally know our usage is a little different. I've never, as some of you who've worked with us can attest, we always go for 3 years for the basic usage. And then anything on top of that would be considered advertising, digital advertising, quote unquote print, is outside of that. So we usually know the usage beforehand, but we may not know, and the regions may not know specifically where it's going to be used until it launches. And we have our timelines are really big. And so say Brazil launches something in 2023, Peru might not launch it till 2024 or 25. So not only do we have to, they don't know what they're going to be doing, we have to just keep that timeline and just say it's kind of an overarching, we're going to use it in digital advertising, but we don't know where. So we try to get that information at the launch of the job. Obviously, we are the client, but we're dealing with different regions, different even specific markets. And sometimes they know the answers and sometimes they don't. So we try to be as, me as an art producer and my colleague, Karen Salcedo, we try to be as specific as we can, but we don't always have the information, all the information.
But sometimes you have to end up covering yourself.
Yes, definitely.
Hence the 3 years. And
yes,
yeah,
yes,
global.
yes.
All right. So Heather, at your agency, what kind of conversations are happening around usage? Is it a
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to add on to the, wanting to get that information up front as much as possible, but not always having all the answers up front either. So a lot of times we're kind of educating our clients on what we think they might need. They might think, oh, it's just going to go in social, but then we'll ask more questions like, could it, live in other places, and help sort of craft the package for them so that they are covered up front. But
That's
you know,
so
we don't always, what's that?
I'm sorry, Heather. I was just gonna say that's so interesting because I feel like there's so much times that I feel like it's coming from the client who's like, I want unlimited usage, or I want it for this long, or however, and it feels so client directed. It's interesting to hear you say that you're trying to kind of push the conversation.
It can just, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think some clients are just more, they're just better versed in it and others aren't. And so you kind of, you know, we have so many different clients and they all have their own usage, you know, specific usage needs. So it just is very case by case. And, you know, when a campaign gets briefed into, you know, the creatives aren't aware so much as to all the places it's going to end up, but they'll know the primary places. Like they'll know this is going to be an out-of-home campaign, or this is going to be a digital social campaign, or we're going to make an image library for our clients, but they aren't necessarily briefed on like the full usage package that we're securing. That's more kind of behind the scenes that we're working out with brand and the clients. And they're kind of more focused on like the primary places where it's going to show up.
So,
Sorry,
no,
Heather.
go ahead, Cliff. I was going to ask you a question, but you might be about to answer it. So
I think that's very true, and I think that's a really good point to raise, actually, because we do try to get as much information up front in terms of usage. However, what is happening more and more, I'm noticing in terms of creative development, is that as ideas begin to evolve and as they develop, new things come up, and there is some media which emerges, which wasn't actually there at the beginning. And you think, oh, wow, this idea is amazing. Wouldn't it be incredible if we did this or this? Or that'd be an amazing out of home. Or so that does happen. More and more, I think, you know, you're kind of, I know it's, you know, it's not cliche, but more and more we are kind of building the airplane as we're taking off, you know, we kind of, so there are still things that we don't know, you know, because ideas are fluid and things happen in different ways now. You know, creative development is happening all the time, even in production, even when we're actually shooting, it's still happening.
But don't you think that digital allows for that speed now more than ever? Like people can be pretty agile and nimble in their planning.
Absolutely. It is, and you know, people have an amazing array of media. You know, creatives have an incredible paint box now that, you know, you can do so much. You can do from stills to like GIFs to short form motion. There's lots of stuff that just emerges. So it can get complicated, but it is something which, you know, we as producers are dealing with on our side. And I know obviously we then come to you to say, oh, this has happened, that's happened, and then we kind of figure it out together. But it is a moving target.
Do you find that your clients are open to adjusting budgets when those media plans change, or do they push back on that?
You want me to do that one?
Sure. Sorry.
Probably not initially. You know, I think they just want to try and get as much as they possibly can for the budget that they've allocated. It's a conversation, you know, and it varies from client to client. Some clients are really, you know, understanding and want to work with us to try and, you know, move things forward. And then other clients just want everything. So it's a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
what about talent usage? You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of times where talent usage is different than the photography usage. Teri, can you talk to why that might be?
Well, for us, to be honest, I do mostly real people. So if it's because it's about a real product or whatever. So in general, we're getting that for very cheap or sometimes no fee at all. And so because we're casting them from our pool of people who use our products.
Businesses or something.
Yeah. And then we don't have the issue of like, this person was paid to, you know, promote this piece. So we don't in general, but there's been occasions where we've done something for a launch where we've had actors or models included, and there hasn't been anything, except for some events, there hasn't been any like A-list talent that we've had to deal with anything kind of out of the ordinary rather than just normal SAG rates. So I haven't noticed anything major, except of course, when we go into print with non-union like talent, sometimes we will use non-union as well. So for print, that always seems like this big jump because we're mostly just doing digital assets. But then with print, there's always like this huge jump in talent prices that I've noticed. And it's still, but that's always hard too, because again, we're working most of the time without media plans. You're like, I don't know if this is going to be on billboards or some wild postings or, so you just have to kind of write that in. But again, if it's non-union, the price point that you really have to pay, even with that jump, is so not a major thing to kind of deal with.
It is interesting how it happens because I feel like sometimes you guys, clients might require unlimited use, unlimited time for the photographer or 5 years, but then they can only afford 1 year for the talent or 2 years. And it's like, where did that disconnect happen? Where
I'm dealing with that right now, where we have a project where they want to pick up all the creative from last year, but nothing else was the talent usage, the music, the product photos, none of that was included. So I have to re-up all of that. And they were just all surprised, but you're like, that's all, again, I go on year by year budgets and I'm working direct with my stakeholders. So they only can spend what they can spend. And then we just figure it out on the budget next year. But for this year, they've then cut it down. So instead of making 15 pieces of assets, we've now cut it down to 5. And because we only really need 5. So that's been interesting too, because it's like, we're always checking on data too, like what's performing well. So we'll only re-up maybe those ads that are testing well as well.
I have a question for Heather Harvey. So what usages are being asked for right now from most of your clients? Do you see any kind of trends?
I mean, the only trends I was thinking about that the only trends might be that I've seen change over the years in recent times is just that we do more like digital only packages and we aren't, getting the full, what we used to sort of secure with, out of home and print and kind of all those above the line uses. I think that as budgets shift and as let's be honest, like they aren't getting bigger, they're only shrinking. So, if it's truly only going to live in a social space or in a digital space, then there isn't really a need to secure all of these other mediums. So I think that's a shift, like you were saying in the beginning that, or I think Vanessa was saying in the beginning that, the digital landscape has really shifted so many things. The only other thing that's come up for me recently is OTT usage. That's a new thing that I'm just learning about and where it fits is it considered internet, digital, or is it broadcast? And so that's the first time in recent years where I'm like, what is that and where does that live? I do think the NFT thing is going to be fascinating to deal with at some point.
One of the first things that was really important to us at the AMA to do was to create a usage chart, a usage glossary explaining all of the terms, because we found that, as we were all talking, all these new terminology was coming up and, almost every couple of weeks you heard something new. And so that's something that we actually have on our website. And we're actually hoping at some point to be able to share it with all the art buyers to make sure that, we're all speaking the same language and we're on the same page. So we're really proud of that. We worked really hard on it.
Yeah, I checked that out. It's a great resource.
I used it today.
Yeah.
And just to jump in though, for everyone else out there listening, if there are terms that you're not finding represented, please tell us and we will add them. We want this to really be like a living, breathing, really useful resource. So please send anything. Or if you have alternate definitions for terms that we're defining, please tell us as well.
And backing up for just a second, sorry to interrupt you, Stacy. Heather, for the people who don't know, can you tell us what OTT is?
I mean, I'll do my best.
We can all kind of chime in and define it.
Yeah, please add to it. I mean, it stands for over the top, and it's essentially streaming services that more and more people are, I think, canceling their traditional cable memberships and instead subscriptions, and instead are streaming through all the various platforms. So Peacock and Hulu. And so, you know, imagery is starting to pop up in those spaces. And for me recently, it was going to be a still image that popped up when you pushed pause on Peacock. So I consider that to be outside of the traditional internet digital use in my mind. So I negotiated it as such. But I still need to have some more conversations on, you know, on this end here at the agency, just to make sure that's how everyone else is seeing it as well.
Cliff, are there any other new usages that you see coming up besides over the top?
Not really. I think, you know, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I mean, some of the stuff that's happening is, I guess it falls into kind of out of home, but you know, what a lot of brands are doing activations, which happen in various forms. They're kind of physical things, or actually some digital things now too, but and they're sort of classed as activations. But I guess they fall either within digital or within out of home. So I guess they're kind of covered. But no, I mean, beyond the streaming stuff that, and Heather and I have talked about that before. Yeah, I mean, things are evolving. Things are beginning to happen where we can't really see it yet, but it's coming up, and you know, we're having to deal with it as we you know, as we
On the fly.
Yeah, kinda, absolutely.
Is unlimited usage and time a requirement for any of your clients? And if they are asking for that, why?
Our side is always asking for that. If that's the first thing they'll ask for, just because then they can set it and forget it, and they don't have to worry about it. And then also the internet's weird because once it's out, it's out. You can't really pull it back, even if your buy is for a year. Feasibly, someone could have grabbed it, captured it, put it on a different platform, and it's kind of out of your hands. So if we can, that will be the first thing we'll do, but it doesn't work always that way.
And are the fees supporting that usage that you're paying?
No, I don't think so. But it's tricky again, because it's like we don't use our stuff that long. It goes out, but they still want it. So it's kind of like that dance with the, you know, the stakeholder being, and the talent, and the artist making the product. It's like, I don't think we're going to use this very much. Like, I would tell you if they were going to do like a massive campaign with it, but like they're asking for this, and it just depends on the artist we're working with as well, if they're comfortable with it or not.
Okay, I have another big one, whoever wants to take it. How do you guys define the difference between above the line and below the line?
I can take that quickly. I know Heather's got a point of view on that too. I don't think there is a line anymore. I don't think there's been a line for like a long time. Certainly not, you know, from what I'm making or the way that we've been sort of approaching it. I know that, you know, clients use things for what I call retail or in-store, or, you know, and really we don't really see a line, to be honest. It's just all about deliverables, and it's all about output, and it's all about assets and what we're making. I don't really think it matters much in terms of below or above, to be honest.
If I can jump in quickly, from my experience, that was always based on, you know, whether that was a paid insertion or use or not. You know, there's like organic owned media in your own store where you don't have to buy that space. And then there's the, you know, everywhere that really requires a paid, like a budget. And you feel like that's gone, that distinction?
I think for me, yeah, I think it has. You know, I don't think clients are looking at it that way. I mean, I can understand that. I can understand that thinking. But I think the way that certainly we make assets, and certainly, you know, the clients that we have, I guess it very much depends on the client and, you know, the nature of what they do. But our clients tend to, you know, make assets that live in both. They live kind of, you'll see them in branch, you'll see them out of home, you'll see them on your computer. So, they kind of live everywhere.
So
So
essentially everything becomes above the line in that old thinking.
yeah, pretty much. I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And Allie, where do you go when you need to define a usage? Is there a source that you use?
No, not really. In my past life, I was a rep for 22 years. So I guess Karen and I kind of talk about it, but we are direct sales. We're not retail. Our stuff is not in stores. So right now, what we're dealing with are pretty much the normal usages.
Right.
Hulu has just come up, but I think that's more in a not an OTT. I think that's more of a normal broadcast commercial. But obviously, with streaming, they think about it differently. Even with the talent, they think about it differently. So that's something that's probably going to be more in our future.
I mean, would it be helpful for you guys for the AMA to distribute our glossary to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be great.
Okay,
Yeah.
we could take that up in our board meeting that we have later today to see if we could make that happen for everybody. Heather, do you want to?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's probably a good time to kind of bring up the idea of work for hire and copyright transfer. And Vanessa, you and I were having this conversation yesterday. We even kind of looped a lawyer in on it, and we were wondering, is there a difference between the two? What is your, how do you define it? What's the differences for you, if any?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm always adverse to ever transferring a copyright, and work for hire is a term that I really honestly didn't come across until the last few years because I did so little motion. And then when that became more part of the conversation, to me, it's like, if a job is work for hire, that means copyright transfer is really, gonna happen. That's the way the job is commissioned. But a copyright transfer can always happen later on down the line. So that's the real only distinction, is really when it happens. Both of them result in transfer of copyright from the artist to the client. And it's not something that I typically do. I don't know if that's something that Heather, you do, or Stacy, you often agree to.
I
And
try never to do it.
I've done it once in my entire career, and they paid for it. It was a long-term client that we had a really great, strong relationship with, and they had a reason that they needed it that seemed logical at the time. I'm not sure it is logical anymore, but they also, they were a good client that we'd worked with a lot, and they also paid well for it. And the images were not going to live for very long. It was a tech company, and so we were okay with that. But it's hard to not show those images. It's hard to realize that someone else now owns our, image and our lighting style and all of that, everything we created in that moment. But other than that, there's been no other time that we've ever agreed to it.
Are you guys asking for that ever? Work for hire?
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I just actually like to address the subject. I agree. When I was a rep, never ever copyright. I think I did it once, and as Heather said, it was very handsomely paid for. But at Mary Kay, because the way we work and our assets go out all over the world, for the length of time that we have the usage, the licensing for those assets, we own the copyright, because we have a huge legal department that globally goes after anyone who is using our images. And a photographer or a rep just doesn't have those, assets to do that, the ability to do that on the scale that we do. We allow them to use the image in their portfolio. If it is something that does not have Mary Kay logo on it, after we are finished using it, they can sell it for stock. Obviously, if it's a model image, they would have to get the licensing, the agreement from the model on that. But it's just for that specific amount of time. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had to sit down with a photographer. I've done it with some of y'all, and with the rep, and explain exactly what it is. And we stick to it. And we also go back and pay reuse. So if that 3 years runs out, or they want an additional year of advertising, we go back and pay for it. We don't consider that we own it for the entire time.
Well, that's
And that for add-in, for eternity.
Yeah,
So,
that's a very reasonable way to approach it. It's like a shared copyright during the time that you're licensing the image.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a big question that always drives me crazy. Why is it that agencies sometimes are so adverse to saying unlimited time, unlimited use, instead of a copyright transfer, when it's really the same thing? But I've had pushback from agencies and direct clients not being willing to do that. But it makes us as agents feel so much better to know that our photographers are retaining their copyright.
But I never thought of unlimited use and limited time as transfer of copyright ever.
No, it's
Right,
not.
it's
I'm
not.
saying instead.
Yeah, I know. Instead
So,
of,
because
they
sometimes
want-
clients will want a buyout, right? And so
yeah,
I'll
and I hate
say,
that word buyout.
instead of a buyout, how about we do unlimited time and unlimited use? And some art buyers are okay with it, but I've also had pushback before that they need the buyout, that they can't take unlimited time, unlimited use.
But
I don't
I've
know.
also heard actually buyout be referred to as unlimited use in perpetuity rather than
Yes,
copyright
in perpetuity,
transfer. So
yeah.
I feel like there's such a lack of clarity even around that I think some art buyers, some producers, even some reps are having these conversations and not necessarily aligning on even what they're talking about, because everybody comes at it with their own definition of the term, and then they have the conversation with that in mind. And that may not be what the client wants, but if people aren't educated, then they're assuming that, that copyright transfer is what's being talked about, but maybe it isn't.
I think for us, if the word buyout or God forbid work for hire comes up in conversation, we would redirect our clients into an in perpetuity space. Just there's no need for them to have own copyright, and really kind of try to understand the needs and desires for that. So I think some of it comes from our clients not fully understanding all the terminologies and the laws and what they're actually asking for. At least that's been my experience. And again, we just try to educate them on, steering them down a different path. And also, again, not overpaying for something you likely don't need. So I still try to get people to come back down to let's get 2 to 3 years usage, and then pre-negotiate reusage fees. That to me is the best bang for your buck.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess this is really where we as reps have our own ways of doing business, and that's what makes this kind of a unique or a really robust conversation, that everybody comes into it with their own idea, and that's what gives us each our competitive advantage, that you go into it doing what's best for your artist and not necessarily adhering to what we all may be feeling personally. So it is a lot. But I think that for me, that because motion and print are converging so much now, I feel like that's part of what's changing this conversation and making work for hire or these terms more of a conversation that I'm not used to having. I don't know, Teri, if that's the case for you, if you've always dealt as equally in motion and print.
It's interesting because as we get into XR creation and things like that, where the one thing I really like about the company I work for is they are believing creators, right? And now it's more digital creators, but it can be true for photographers or directors as well, where if we work with a creator and we want them to create something for us for a campaign, which happens all the time, we don't want to own it. We don't even want to direct them too much. Like, we came to them because they do this thing and we give them a little, like, some lines to play within, but then they go push it out and then they can sell it. They can do whatever they want with it later. It's not ours to own. And that's because we're trying to do this creator first kind of environment, which is kind of embracing this more, because honestly, like, per our, top down is like, creators are the future of the internet, et cetera. So we've always have been very open about do what you want with it later, but we also work with a lot of creators who do, you can see on their Instagram, et cetera, that they do a ton of work for hire for specific brands, where it would mean less if someone else could take that Chanel bag or whatever they did with an AR filter on top. But we're always open to take it, bend it again, change it for something else and sell it down the road if you'd like.
Okay, so here's a question, just recognizing the people that are in the audience and are listening. As a rep, Stacy and Vanessa, you might have had this similar experience. Sometimes you get a PO that has terms and conditions attached to it. And on the back of the terms and conditions, they're all listed out there. There's work for hire, or you can't use it for self-promotion, or whatever it is. And it's in the terms, and they don't let you cross out those terms, right? You have to put that information on the front of the PO, whatever is going to supersede what's in those terms. I always advise my photographers, obviously we have to read that, and obviously we need to make sure we cross that out by including that information on the front of our PO. What is your experience, Heather, with that, and how open are clients and your agency or, your legal department for us to do that?
I think for us, we don't have separate PO terms and conditions for stills and film. So I think those are written more for the film side of things than those of us that are dealing with usage terms. So that it is important to include that up front in the, I guess on the front of the PO. And, I think that if we do get that pushback, I'm more than happy to take it to our lawyers, and again, it's a conversation and we work things out, but the front of the PO should list all of the usage terms, and that should be very crystal clear. That is what we're agreeing to. The terms and conditions, at least ours notes that in our terms and conditions, unless otherwise stated on the front of the PO, these are the terms and conditions.
Kelly is pointing out and reminding us that, losing your copyright and your ability to promote your work makes it really difficult for the artists who are growing their work and their books, and particularly for diverse artists whose, access to the resources are even harder to come by. So when a client says, you can't show this for self-promotion, or obviously asking for a copyright transfer or something like that, I would love for them to think more about that, like what they're limiting the artist from doing with that work by limiting our usage on our own. It's more than just, for their reasons. No.
Totally. That's really relevant. We've been having conversations with clients with exactly that. There are some clients who are very, very particular about with artists not being able to show the work in their portfolios, or for whatever reason. But that's something we push against at the agency at Droga, and exactly for that reason, because I think if you are wanting to work with a much more diverse pool of artists and photographers and illustrators and whoever, then they need to be able to say that. They need to be able to say that they've worked on that brand and that agency and stuff, and that's hugely important. So that's something which we're very, aware of. And, we have real conversations with clients about that.
That's great. That's good to hear. I know the pharma space, it's kind of a known thing. You just can't share your work ever. But I do see a few people letting it, slip in that with written permission. And if we don't tag the client or, attach their name to it, we're starting to be able to share it. So it's nice to hear that you guys are thinking about that. And that might be a trend that's going in our favor. So thank you for having those conversations.
For some of the stuff that we do for digital, it's different with stills, I get it, but like that would be interesting is like I want them to promote that work too. It's not just us saying like, look at our campaign. I would love if an artist who did photography was like, here's my campaign going out today, or here's my outtakes of that. That just is all part of the idea of social. So I think that's really cool. I didn't like just now, I was like, I normally think about it digital, but I should absolutely start thinking about it for photographers, illustrators, and being like, push this out too in your channels, because they're going to hit markets that we can't touch. And it's good, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, we love it.
I could jump in with a question here about that. Is there an expectation sometimes that your artists, that the artists that you're commissioning will sort of act as influencers and help to promote the brand? And if that is an expectation, is that an added fee you're willing to offer?
We do that if it's if I'm again talking more about XR, the like AR filters, etc. If I need them to promote it, it will be in the contract, and it's definitely an added fee. Or if I want them to post as a paid posting as well, we will ask for that. And then if we don't need them to post, it's not part of the deal. But we still are like, hey, it's exciting. Here's the final cut of our video that we did. Do you want to push it out?
And do you actually have a name for that type of usage?
I don't, but we can add it to the glossary.
I feel like we should.
It is important.
Yeah.
Well,
Influencer, right?
Yeah, basically influencer usage, yeah.
interestingly, I also, besides representing photographers, represent stylists and set designers, event designers, manicurists. I had a client come to me and they wanted one of my stylists to post. And that's always a big conversation, right? The fact that the talent that work on the shoots, they're not getting more money for usage, or when things are picked up again later. And it's a conversation that I know all the stylist agents are keen to have. But I did have a situation where a client wanted the stylist to do social postings, and I was able to get additional money for him, which I thought was a really great, kind of shift of what's happening in the past that, I'm hoping will become more of the norm, because clients do expect, talent to post when they work on a shoot. And some talent have, really robust followers, and they are influencers in their own right.
Stacy, before we move on to the next section, there's a comment in the chat that I kind of want to bring up and address here. I'm wondering from your client's point of view, or Ali and Teri, from your brand's point of view, a lot of people are still thinking about digital as this new media, when in fact it is like the biggest, scalable media out there. When the person's asking, when are we going to stop doing that? I just would love to hear from you. Are you guys thinking about it as new media? Or are you just thinking, Teri, you at the tech company are obviously thinking that it's, the future.
The
No,
media.
we think of it as pretty much the media, although and also that changes too, depending on the country, because there are still countries like sort of in Eastern Europe where access, or what we consider our European region, which like we're in Kazakhstan and places like that, where women don't necessarily have access to continual internet, where print is still queen. So, but no, that's included in our, what we call our internal usage for 3 years. It's not really internal. I could talk a long time about that, but It, that is included, like our Mary Kay hosted and owned IG site, Facebook, YouTube, and websites. That's in our usage. And then we do have, like, if they want to do digital advertising, whether it's video or stills, that's additional. So it's definitely top of mind and where things are going. We're very in tune with that. And some markets are more in tune like than others, like Latin America is all over it all the time.
I have a question just to jump in. I'm curious about, now that print and motion are being done together, are your clients open to not having buyouts on motion? Because I know that especially in fashion, they're trying to change that. So where a director does get usage, is that something that your agency and your clients are open to?
I can say I think that would be a new way of working when it comes to video for us. I think we still probably follow the traditional model. So that hasn't really come up at our agency. Cliff, has that come up for you at Droga?
No, I think like you, we follow the traditional kind of method in terms of the way that directors and film is negotiated versus stills. Yeah, I mean it is a disconnect, and it's been a disconnect for ever. And it just, yeah, I mean I guess it's probably something we should all talk about. But we work in the older method, if you like.
And Cliff, I don't know if this is true for you, but if we hire a photographer who's shooting both stills and motion, we can have different terms negotiated. So the video can be considered work for hire, and the stills can have usage terms.
Yes.
And then another question, a little bit off topic, but since we're talking about it, I'm just curious. Do you guys find that the motion is still really taking the lead above the stills in terms of who's going to be the photographer or director?
Not necessarily. I think that for some campaigns, I know we did this recently for a client. It was for this massive out-of-home campaign, and then we added on a video component to it. So I think it can go probably both ways.
We'll hire a photographer and then hire a separate director or DP. We usually can't hire, because of our budgets, like a big director. A lot of times we'll hire a DP whose work we really, really like. And then we have our ACD of video direct it a lot of the time. But here, like I'm working on 2 projects next week. One is predominantly photo model stills, but we will have social motion video on set, and our internal team is shooting that. And then the next day, we have a photo model shoot with one photographer, and then we have a DP on set as well, which will be a big promo video. So it does seem to me that video is driving a lot of the art direction now. And we're sort of, my love of photography, so I don't want it to ever become the redheaded stepchild. So it's like I really try to push the photography because that's my thing. But video, so much more is coming in to be such an important part of it, and it lives on social media forever and ever.
Thank you for that. Okay, another question. What should be considered when pricing usage for you guys?
Like, I think one of the things we've been talking about is like how, from our perspective, should we consider things like the size of the brand and the media, you know, the social media following, and or is a brand really just still going with the straightforward, this is our media plan, base it on that? Like, has digital changed the way, I guess, brands budget for usage? How could that affect or help us better quote for it? I don't know. Maybe
Well,
Allie, if that
I've
makes a
had
difference for you.
clients who, or photographers in the past who have been like, oh my God, that client is enormous. They have this many, you know, this much in
Exactly.
revenue every year. And I'm like, okay, yes, but this is a very small portion of their media buy. And while they are this enormous company, they've only allocated a certain amount of budget. I'm not advocating for, yes, I would like to charge more for, you know, the usage and all of that. You know, how transparent are your clients, you know, or the brands that you, or maybe you don't even know what your media buy is at the time. So I think we're struggling with what to base our usage on in an accurate way that's consistent. So we're wondering what information is at your fingertips to share with us.
I mean, I always try to explain to our clients or the people that we reach out to, our photographers and video people, that each project that I have has a different budget. And just because we had twice as much last time doesn't mean that I have that much this time. And, or, well, this is only for Latin America as opposed to a global budget. And why, you know, I'm either can pay the models more on one and the photographer more on one, or, you know, so it really comes down to the budget. And there are times when, you know, I have to go back and say, you know, we don't have enough money. We need to find more money for this because of X, Y, or Z. And, you know, I have to keep the company's budget and our monies in line, but I also, because I've been on the other side, know what something is worth. And so I tried to be a fair advocate for both sides, and hopefully, you know, we can always meet in the middle.
I just want to touch on that too. I think that, and I feel like Cliff, you and I have touched on, we've discussed this recently, like that is at the end of the day, my primary goal and hope as an art producer is to really balance the, you know, fairly between the artist and the client, and so that both parties walk away happy and feel good about the arrangement. So, I mean, that's such a priority. And I think I speak for everyone that is on our team here, that's how we approach every project. I do think digital budgets traditionally are smaller, and it's just kind of, it is, I don't know. I know that the reach is growing, and it is the media. It's not, you know, it continues to grow, but I still do think that there's a premium placed on out of home and print, you know, consumer magazine print, and that digital is still seen as like, oh, we don't have big budgets for that. So
it's just crazy to think, knowing how prevalent it is and how quantifiable it is and all the data everybody gets from it, that it's still not prioritized in the budgets.
It drives us
hopefully
nuts.
shifting. Yeah.
It does. It's absolutely true. And I think one of the reasons that it's kind of the perception is like that is because digital media is consumed maybe differently. I mean, in a way, it's consumed in the same way as an out of home. You drive past the poster, an out of home, and it's done in 6 seconds. I mean, it's, you know, you've seen it and you're gone. So clients think that, you know, digital media, it's like it's done, and therefore, you know, they don't necessarily want to make a huge investment in it. It may be an old perception, but I think it's real. I think it's, you know.
I also think they need so much more content to fill their channel or their pipeline. So they need an enormously larger value from that shoot or whatever that they're doing, because they don't just need that one photograph for the billboard out on 95. They need a lot, which you'd think would mean they would pay more for it, but in their minds, I think it's the 99 cents for buying a song mentality.
Yeah, it's true. The internet has a voracious appetite, and clients talk to us about volume all the time. It's a conversation that comes up. Like spot lists have gone from 4 or 5 a day to 15, 20 a day.
Yeah.
Sometimes. So yeah, it's definitely evolving.
That's a kind of a good segue actually into a more practical conversation about how you guys manage tracking images. Like, is there a software you use, your data, the management and the reuse and the renewals? I don't know, Teri, if you guys have a system that works.
We do. It's a pain in the butt, but it's really quite impressive. It's like you have to enter every single release like multiple times with names and stuff like that. And then you'll say when it's up, and you can tell like 10 people that it should notify, because what if you're not there any longer, etc. But it's just really, it's arduous, but it's really, really cool.
And
We have a digital asset management program that we are updating. Well, yeah. And so we have a whole digital asset management department, and I put the usage in, or Karen puts the usage in, and then every market gets an expiry report every month of when things are supposed to be taken down. Now, I can't say that they always read it, but, and then also once a year, our account managers will sit down with their clients and say, these are all the images that are expiring this year. What do you want to renew?
Okay.
So, and then obviously I get requests all the time about, well, we want to extend usage on this, or, we've got a big PR campaign or something coming up in Germany and we need this. So we try to keep track of it that way, but we are getting a new DAM system. So I don't know how that's going to work.
One plug though, also for the calls from the rep. I love that email that's like, hey, your rights are up. Do you need, and you're like, oh yeah, forever. I love those. Don't ever let those stop, even though
that was going to be
growing.
a follow-up question, was like, do you guys
So what about an ad agency?
Oh yeah, it's a good question, Stacy.
Because you
If
guys
you wanna-
separate brand direct. So what about
Yeah.
Heather and Cliff? How do you guys do it?
I'll speak for us that it's, some of our clients have really sophisticated, content management systems and dams in place, and others do not. And we do our best to, remind them and track it on our end. But, I think ultimately it really does fall onto the client side to manage it and to keep up with it.
And
I'm curious, Cliff, how you guys do things at Droga.
Yeah, similar. Some clients are, very sophisticated. Other clients are not. We have part of our business affairs, internal business affairs department, which is fairly significant. We have like dedicated talent management. So we do have these, these sort of matrices of who's worked on what and when it happened and stuff like that. So we do track it. Maybe not quite as sophisticated as Teri's in terms of getting the alerts and stuff, but it is something that we review regularly. Yeah, we try.
And what happens when an image is being used after the use has expired? When a client keeps it up?
I can tell you what happens in my office.
Yeah, I go after, we do a lot of pretty intense like follow-ups, and we find a pretty wide range of responses. Sometimes it's, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And sometimes it's like, oh, but aren't we still within the grace period? Or, it's not my problem, it's a third party, or there's sort of the range of excuses, and it does vary. Some clients are great. I won't say they're all that way, but there is a range. So And it's tricky when there's an ad agency involved and that ad agency is no longer involved, and you negotiated with someone and then they change over. So, but do you guys in general, I mean, any of you can take this, feel that it's ultimately the client's responsibility or the rep's responsibility to manage that, giving notice of expiration or renewal?
I think it's both. I mean, we've agreed, we've made an
Right.
agreement. You guys have signed the agreement. I think it's shared. I know that when I get notifications from either a model agency or a photographer, we do our best to send it out to our markets to say, you've got to take this down, because I don't see what's going on in Malaysia. I don't see what's going on in Taiwan. But I'm wondering, do any of y'all or any of your artists use bots? Because I know some artists use bots to go out on the internet and find this information. But sometimes I have found, and through art, because we'll get a bunch of information, say from one artist, and they said these images are up. And when we go to look at the links, it's not there because their bot has gone so far down that it looks like it's still up, but it's actually not.
The syndication agencies use all those bots
Yeah. So,
and those web crawling software.
yeah. So, it's not like we don't say, oh no, it's a bot. You found it deep within. We're not going to, take it down, or we're not going to reimburse you or whatever. But we try to, come to an agreement, and depending on how long the images have still been up, and we usually pay because we made the mistake.
Right.
Yeah, and from our point of view, when we find it, we try and we assume goodwill and reach out in a kind, professional manner and hope that it's received in the same way. But sometimes there's penalties associated with it because it might be really egregious, and it just might, and sometimes there's not. It really depends. But we just want to make it right, and we want to protect the usage. Like, usage is there for a reason. Copyright is a thing. Like, usage is a thing. Like, so we have to protect it and take it seriously. And we appreciate the clients that are there on the ride with us to be like, oh my God, let's make this right and figure it out. We are kind of closing into our, ending our time. But before we do, I just kind of wanted to put it out there to the panel if anybody had any questions, and to the audience. We have a few more minutes to be able to answer anything that hasn't gotten asked, or if any of you guys have questions for each other or for us.
There's one question about like date of first insertion or start date, which is a topic that is often, difficult to get people to commit to. So like, when do we actually set? When is the expiration? Because it's got to start somewhere. So, I know I have a range of clients. Some of them, are really direct to client, and we see the picture being used 2 weeks later, and some it's a year or more out. So do you, as art buyers, do you try to be good at coming back and providing that data first insertion?
Well, we try.
Teri, you're shaking your head.
We do try. And we do tend to look at that as the start date, as data first insertion. So we try to do that. We do ask our account teams to give us information regarding when that was first released, and then we can put that into our database.
And sometimes it's easy if it's a product launch, if it's there is something where you see it, but sometimes it's really opaque and it's so hard to know, or if it's only advertising we don't see, or like you said, if it's in some other country. So
yeah, and sometimes it gets delayed for whatever reason.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unless it's gonna get delayed by a lot, I feel like I've got enough wiggle room. Like, it'll launch sometime that month, but again, it's on platform or off, it's like digital. So I'm not gonna be like, push it by 15 days so I get another 15 days on the back end. I'm just like, January is January.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do try to put that on the PO if I have that information, so that we're all tracking on the same information. but you don't always have it. So it can,
And
require
when you
follow-up.
don't have it, what do you use? Do you use the invoice date? Do you use the shoot date? Do you use the deliverable date? Like, what's a fair? I mean, it might vary by job. I'm just thinking about it now.
I mean, I think that we would just go, if we didn't provide it up front, we would just try to go back in time and figure out, well, when did it launch? When did it first show up in, on social media or in retail? Or so it's just, there's, sometimes media isn't even handled by our agency. So you're just handing assets off to another agency to do something with. So,
well, and that goes back to the sharing for your self-promotion. Sometimes you're not allowed to share until the client has shown the image. I mean, most times till the client has shown the images, and it could be a year sometimes before the images are out there in the world. So when we know it's going to be a long, launch pad there, we will say, we will put a kind of a time limit on it. If after the first year the work hasn't been shown, we'd like to have permission to be able to show it ourselves or something like that.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have to chase both start date and then, it used to be that I would get clients to sign a release to be like, yep, we're no longer using it. And it was like a clear, that way we knew if we saw it again, it was a very clear time to, make a phone call and be like, okay, hey, I see it's out there. But I have a really hard time getting anyone to commit to the end date too. So it's tricky, but.
We have definite big start and end dates. Occasionally I'll have a country that doesn't know. So I'll just say TBD, or I'll take the first date, say, for example, if Brazil is launching in May and Peru doesn't know yet, I'll give Peru from May. So unless they come back and say, no, we're not launching it for another year, we need 3 years from there, then.
So Allie, do you have a standard usage chart based on the country that is just used by Mary Kay, or is it different based on just the talent that you're using, what the usage costs are? Like L'Oreal has a standard
No,
usage chart.
I don't.
Usage
No.
chart.
No.
Yeah.
No.
I think we're kind of at time, unless people want to, we still have a lot of people on. There's I don't know if there's any other questions. Heather, were you getting any other questions?
Well, I was just looking, maybe we'll just do one more because everyone, I know everyone's time is limited and we can save these questions and address them later. But GIF and animations are a new media that's becoming more popular. Popular. I'm curious to know if a client decides to use individual frames from an animation, how does that affect the usage fee? And how does the volume of deliverables really factor in, other than the number of shoot days, of course? Cliff, have you had any experience with that?
I think we still pretty much go by the number of shoot dates when we're actually looking at how we approach a production rather than the number of deliverables. It's in conversation with the artist in terms of what is comfortable. I mean, how many days do we need in order to do that comfortably? So we don't really have a discussion so much about actually the number of deliverables, because actually one asset may lead to 5 deliverables. So it's really difficult to nail that down completely. So we still tend to go by a day rate, and what we can comfortably achieve within that day, and what is fair for what we are looking to achieve on that day. That's kind of
how do you translate that then into renewals? Because at that point, it is about number of assets that are going to be renewed.
It does. And then, I mean, what we do in terms of renewals and options is we do get granular with it. So depending on what we're doing in terms of the project, what we may do is we may go onto a renewal for the entire project. We go, okay, we can use everything from the project for X, or we then go by on a per image basis. So if the client doesn't want to go, like, we don't need everything, but we know that those 4 assets were really successful and we love them, we want to renew those. So we go, you know, we kind of break it down into if you want everything, it's this. If you want to go per image, if you want to go a la carte, we do it like that as well.
Well, and then if I were pricing that, I'd price the a la carte higher so that,
Yeah.
and then the value isn't purchasing more of it. You'd pay more money to get all of it, but I want you to purchase all of it. So I'd kind of price it that way.
Exactly.
And it go opposite. We do number of shots. Like, so if I know I've got 15 product shots that I need, and then if I'm doing gifts and it's made up of photo stills, honestly, I wasn't counting each one of the stills that made up that GIF as 5 extra images. I was calling it just a single GIF, and then it changes. Sometimes I would shorten it. So even if it is an interesting question because those are extra stills that they were having to retouch, but during the GIF creation and editorial, we might lose half the stills and only end up with 3 because we just need a really quick, you know, like kind of boomerang feel. So that is interesting, but I just was calling them GIFs and paying per GIF on top.
Yeah.
Well, and when we use a day rate, if I were to estimate a job and I agree to a day rate, which we don't always do, but if I did, I would take into account the scope of the job and the deliverables and how many shots, how many scenarios, how many setups, how many company moves, like the complexity of the project. So then if you came back to me later and you added another scenario, or we have to make another company move or whatever it is, that's changed the scope for me. So even though you're paying for my photographer for the day, you know, there might be a situation where I'm going to raise my hand and say, you know what, we're actually adding more here and the value of this day has increased. You know, if it's a quick, like bring in a different talent in the same scenario and you end up with another deliverable, that's probably fine. But, you know, sometimes the day rate, there does need to be an overage for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so do you guys on the panel have any questions or anything else that didn't get touched on? I feel like it was such a robust, like full conversation. No?
We'll save the NFTs for next time.
I hope you'll all come back for that one.
That's why I haven't addressed any of those that have come up in the chat, because I feel like that's like a whole nother conversation, a whole nother webinar. So
Yeah.
We'll definitely do that. All right.
Well,
Well,
there's an NFT webinar coming.
yeah. Howard, are you listening? All right. Well, this has been great, you guys. This has been amazing and super helpful. And we all really appreciate you guys coming. Be sure to check out the AMA website. We'll send you our usage glossary so that you guys can see it. And we really appreciate everyone being here.
Thank
Thanks,
you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye.